For those at home who are coming to you live, anything can be expected. So I want to start off with a story. A rabbi was giving an instruction to a classroom of children when he asked them this question: how do you know the night is over and the day has come? Well, little boy raised his hand and said, well, Rabbi, you know the night is over and the day has come when you can tell the difference between a horse and a donkey out in the field. The rabbi smiled and repeated the question. A young girl in the class said, well, Rabbi, you can tell the difference between an apple tree and a pear tree. The rabbi acknowledged the response, repeated the question. Finally, the little guy in the back said, Rabbi, we don't know the answer. Will you please just give us the answer to the riddle you posed? I would imagine the rabbi got very quiet, and he looked into all of their eyes. And he said, you know the night is not over, and the day has come when you can look into the eyes of any human being and there see your brother or your sister. For if you do not see your brother or your sister, you know the night is not over, and the day is yet to come. I know in hospice as a chaplain that we've often reminded our team, there's several of us on the team as chaplains, to always try to see that patient as your brother or your sister, because in ways that we can't fully understand, but quantum physics makes sense to me, we are that. We are family. We are one. And I have found that when I'm meeting someone for the first time, or a guy with dementia at 90 and he can't even talk, but I start looking at him like my dad or grandfather or brother, or he was someone's son, all of a sudden, the care increases without even being told. I grew up knowing that. It wasn't taught in my family, trust me. We didn't go to any kind of church, but my church was the woods and nature. But I look about what's going on in the world today, what's going on in our country today, and I can't even begin to wrap my head around it. It makes no sense to me. First of all, the songs are all been perfect leading into this message, because everybody should be welcome. Everybody should be loved. And I have friends who've reached out to me. One's transgender, several are gay couples. They're afraid Marriage Equality Act might get overturned. They're afraid of this or afraid of that. We're seeing now people arrested who have green cards, but yet, and they're not even violent, and are being shipped out. I won't take your time to go through that. And I've asked a lot of my friends, don't send me those things, because I know stuff is happening. But like probably you, what can we do about it, though? How can we shine our light? I just wanted to share this insight because I speak at a lot of different churches, mostly Unitarian and one inclusive Methodist church. But a lot of not a lot actually, some of my evangelical friends are still supporting what's going on. And these are good people. But I looked at Micah in the Old Testament. Micah says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God. So these are the messages I share with my Christian friends. And love one another is found 13 times in the New Testament. And at this one church I shared, when God said love your neighbor, he knew your neighbor would act, look, believe, and love differently than you. It's kind of the whole point. But for some reason, we choose to hang on to what we hang on to, and we're seeing what we're seeing. So let me just share this. Inclusive communities, I think, are essential to fostering environments where individuals can come and they can thrive. They create space where people from various backgrounds feel valued and understood. This faith community is exactly that type of community. There is more of a need than ever. And I remember when this was started, because I spoke at the very first service when that happened, 17, 18 years ago. But there is such a need now more than ever. When we value and foster diversity, we create stronger and more resilient communities. Embracing diversity Embracing diversity fosters mutual respect, understanding, and a sense of belonging for everyone. Dr. Martin Luther King, one of my heroes, referred to this as the beloved community, a concept rooted in the biblical notion of agape love. Some see it as a foretaste of the kingdom of God, where love, justice, and peace reign, where all people learn to live in harmony with one another and God. And King espoused this vision, in fact, gave his life for this vision, seeking to create a society where God's will is done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, let me step back a bit and say King was inclusive. When he said God, he meant everybody. Muslim, Hindu, atheist. I've often shared when I speak in Unitarian churches, take God out and put love in. I'm cool with that. Who knows what the supreme power really is? I like love personally. As I get older, I'm simplifying my theology. I realized so much of it really didn't mean a lot because the bottom line really is love. I do want to share this. Father Richard Rohr, one of my favorite teachers, he's very inclusive and very non-duality. And contemplation is something that I think we all need to take a look at. And that's kind of silencing our minds and being in that present moment. And I know when I do that, it's amazing the insights I can get. In his book, The Naked Now, Learning to See as the Mystics See, Richard Rohr had an interesting take on alternative consciousness. He said this: Jesus' primary metaphor for the new consciousness was the kingdom of God. He is not talking about a place or an afterlife, but a way of seeing and thinking now. The kingdom of God is the naked now, the world without human kingdoms, ethnic communities, national boundaries, or social identifications. That is about as subversive and universalist as you can get, but don't think about it too much. It will surely change your politics and your pocketbook. It all really does begin up here, doesn't it? Our belief systems. When you look back in history, belief systems can be so powerfully good and so powerfully evil. I'm fascinated by that because you can't touch it, you can't see it, a belief. But a belief matched with someone who is a great orator or a grifter can change things, and sometimes in a frightening way. It reminded me of the time, some of you might remember this, but I was down there because I felt like I had to experience it. I was kind of pastoring a funky church in Avon at the time and heard about this rally, Ku Klux Klan rally going downtown at the State House. It was October 17th, 1993. And a friend of mine, who I've lost touch with now, short little guy, Ed, he was an attorney. He wanted to go with me. I said, great. I really wouldn't want to go by myself. Then we found out the Black Panthers were having a rally at the center, the Memorial Center there downtown, the Circle. So you had that going on. You had the Ku Klux Klan going on. This was way before people were checking guns and knives. Federal marshals were everywhere. I still remember helicopters in the air, probably federal marshals, also news. It was just a surreal situation. What was funny is Ed brought this big old Thompson chain reference Bible that I swear was like this big. And I said, Ed, are you going to carry that thing in there? He says, oh, I'm going to stop right here and I'll just read. I said, well, okay, I got to go into the middle of it. That's always me. I had to go experience it. And I have to say, I won't take too much time sharing what I saw, but the darkness was overwhelming. And I saw knives. I saw things like that were hidden. And I heard hate. And there was a lot of people there. And I went down there to just provide a presence in prayer and healing thoughts. It was later I came across this quote from Rumi that said, wherever you stand, you're the soul of that place. So I guess in ways I didn't understand then, I wanted to be the soul of that place. But I saw firsthand what hatred can do and divide people. Now compare that to the children's book and the songs that Amy has been leading us into. Look how far we're going. And this has been around forever, and I won't have time to tell the story about a Purdue prof, Al Chiskin, who shared with me for 2.5 hours. He was a biology prof, and I heard that he was doing effects of torture on political prisoners for Amnesty International, so I was intrigued, because I was always that kind of a guy on campus. And I went in, and it was a cold winter night, and it was dark, and he proceeded to tell me how he got involved. He had just gotten a Princeton PhD in 1963, and before he started at Purdue, he decided to be a bondsman for King down in Birmingham, Alabama. I'll just say this, he got abducted by 4 citizens of Birmingham and was tortured for over 12 hours. But he went into detail of the torture. And I was white. You could see he said, I wanted to share that with you just because I see a lot of universities coming in, and I'm afraid they want to be white knights in shining armor. But although I don't want to dampen your hope, you need to know racism has always been there. And he looked out the window. There was snow on the ground. It was late November, early December in West Lafayette. And he said, just like the grass underneath, it's always looking for a way to rise up. And it was a big education for me. I'll never forget that experience. So what can we do about it? Well, we can write, we can protest, we can make calls. All those are necessary. I ask every day, what is mine to do? But what I'm also stepping back and learning is not to, and I've shared this many times here before, but acknowledge the darkness every day, something new. Acknowledge the darkness. And I've seen a lot of racism taking place now, where there was a Medal of Honor winner, a black gentleman who I think was a colonel maybe, and I want to say World War II. Anyway, his name was taken off the list of World War Medal of Honor winners. And at Arlington National Cemetery, same thing happened with Native Americans and black soldiers under the guise of DEI. You see, DEI is code for racism. We know that now. And I don't use that word flippantly, but this is what we're dealing with. And we're dealing with people of love. We're dealing with people who have kindness. We're dealing with people who have a voice, who have feet, who have hands, just like we heard in that poetry that I read. So to simplify things in what little time we have, I wanted to share 5 acts of sacred service. This was inspired to me by a guy that I brought to Indy many, many years ago. His name was Andrew Harvey. Very eccentric gentleman, kind of the architect of sacred activism. I love Andrew. He's a hoot, but he can be intense. And I rented out CTS, and we had a 3-day symposium on sacred activism. But in his book, The Hope, that's another resource you might want to buy. It's been around for a while. He has 5 acts of sacred service. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of these. But the first act is serving God. Now, I would also say serving love. But serving the divine is a word I often use in my posts on Facebook. Serving the divine, because I'm very much involved in the interfaith community here, so I'm very hip to various different beliefs, but serving the divine. And turning to the divine in whatever way you imagine it, and serving the divine in devotion and gratitude, asking humbly to illumine your mind with sacred wisdom. We cannot get caught up in what's taking place. We cannot get caught up. We acknowledge it, but don't stare at it, because it'll stare right back at you. Acknowledge it, look to the light. Acknowledge it, look to the light. Acknowledge it, look for ways to love. Look for ways to reach out. Look for ways to welcome people so they feel like they belong. 2, serving ourselves. Yeah, self-care. You've heard it before from other teachers here probably. We don't do a very good job of that. It's easier for us to love someone else than it is to love ourselves. Because when we're by ourselves, those thoughts come up. Those not enough thoughts sometimes. Happens to me too. So how do we do that? Grow strong spiritually and physically, being a container for love. So we do that by loving the divine feminine. That's a whole nother talk. The divine feminine, divine masculine. But the divine feminine energy, because that's a nurturing energy. We've had too much patriarchal energy taking place in politics. So the divine feminine, nurture that in ourselves. Looking after the soul through sacred practice. If you don't have a sacred practice, find one. Walking in the woods is sacred practice. That's my favorite sacred practice, by the way. Hugging a tree, meditation, yoga, tai chi. All of these are sacred practices. Prayer. But have some kind of a practice. Looking after the soul through constant inspiration. When I was a coach, I would encourage my clients to have an invisible toolbox at all times. And in that invisible toolbox, in your car, wherever you're at, and at the office, have somewhere handy where there's some affirmations, maybe a paragraph or two that lifts you up, maybe your key songs on a player. So if I'm having a bad day or a wave comes in on my boat and I get rocked a little bit, I have all of those things available. And then I'm aligned again, being aligned with love. We have to be aligned with love. And you know when you're not, but we need to be aligned with love. So, looking after the heart and its emotions by deep shadow work. I'm a big believer, especially in the work that I do. I have a person I go to once every 6 weeks. Call it a coach, spiritual director. She's also a psychotherapist that I get at a cheap price. But everyone ought to have somebody like that from time to time to get a tune-up, because we all have shadow, right? That's a whole nother topic. But we all have that dark side that sometimes comes up. Don't let it control you. Understand how to befriend it. You know, when I wake up in the middle of the night and all of a sudden fear comes up, because I grew up in a house where there was fear all the time, so it's still a part of me a little bit. I've learned to call that fear Ricky. I was Ricky at the time. And what I learned now is when Ricky comes out and I feel those thoughts, I do this while I'm laying in bed. And because those are coming up to be held, not to be healed. To be held, not to be healed. And when Ricky calms down, I say, it's time to go now. It's time to go. And he goes. I mean, that's a talk right there, right? But I found it to be so cool. So, to help in that area. And then looking after the body, diet, exercise, sleep, those kind of common sense things. Serving others. Serving others. And I mean all sentient beings, because that's where I roll. Every person, animal, and nature are all the divine in disguises. Now, if you get that alone, that'll start making you a kinder person and an environmentalist, without using the term environmentalist, because now you're caring about the critters, the animals, nature, the woods, our national parks that are now grossly understaffed. Don't get me started. When we show respect to those with whom we disagree, it disarms them, and it tunes you to the divine in all things. Anger does not solve anything. And what I try to coach my friends who are out there, because they're so angry, I said, anger is not sustainable. You will wear out, you will burn out, and it will hurt you, not anybody else. Use that anger, but then channel it into joy. That's going to be my next talk here. Joy in activism, because we need to be joyful in these times as well. I posted on my Facebook wall today, and I'm very mindful of the time here, so I gotta tune this up. But there's a poem by Hafez that talks about joy too, because Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Dalai Lama knew all about that. Both of those men were fighting such atrocities, be it China and Tibet. Desmond Tutu, the Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa, the horrendous stories he would hear. He would be at a keynote and giving talks like that and moving the people, and then 10 minutes later, when the band starts playing and people go for refreshments, he's the first one on the dance floor. He's been my hero to this day, although he's passed away, because he modeled how we need to navigate through this. We also need celebration. We need music. We need dance. I'm learning so much. That's why I really need to stay on, because there's so much more I could share. But what I've learned in studying other revolutions is the arts. The music was huge, key. Absolutely key behind any movement. Because when I started studying dictators years ago, dictators came into power because they did a lot of things, but two things they really focused on. One was education, to demean it and to control the information, education, and culture. So think about that, education and culture, and then see what's taking place in our country. We need to protect both any way we can. Okay. So, and then I'll just end with on this here, because I could talk about this. I'm kind of jazzed up right now. Serving our community. Think globally, act locally. Look at one or two causes that break your heart and follow that. So in other words, if you're asking yourself, well, what can I do? Aristotle said, where the needs of the world and your talents cross, there lies your vocation. Vocation, Latin term for vocar. That's your calling. If you don't know what your calling is, start jotting down, well, when I look at the news or I'm driving around, what needs really strike a chord with me? There's a million of them out there. Well, write them down. And then you say, what talents do I have to meet those needs? Well, I can make calls. I can write letters. Oh, I can teach this for that. There's so many things we can be doing that will energize us and will make us feel purposeful too. And even congregations can get behind that as well. And then serve globally. Think about our investments. Think about our lifestyle, consciousness at every level. Folks, we got to go deep. We don't have the luxury anymore. We don't. And we got to have more community. We can't afford not to expand, to meet more often in small groups. I'm not saying have more than a Sunday service, but I'm just saying we need each other more and more. And to be thinking about those people that are on the outskirts that don't feel like they belong, invite them now. Don't be shy, invite them to come here. But here's a practical way I think we can help, and I think it's one of the best ways. Think about everybody in this room. And think about everybody in every church going on this Sunday morning, just individual people. This is called Love Now, the new religion of the 21st century, and I'll end with this. On the surface of the world right now, there is war and violence and things seem dark. But calmly and quietly, at the same time, something else is happening underground. An inner revolution is taking place, and certain individuals are being called to a higher light. It's a silent revolution from the inside out, from the ground up. It's time for me to reveal myself. I am an embedded agent of a secret, undercover, clandestine, global operation, a spiritual conspiracy. We have sleeper cells in every nation on the planet. Oh, you won't see us on TV. You won't read about us online or in a newspaper. You won't hear about us in a podcast or on the radio. We don't seek any glory. We don't wear any uniform. We come in all shapes and sizes, ages, colors, and style. Most of us work anonymously. We are quietly working behind the scenes in every country, in every culture, cities, big and small, mountains and valleys and farms and villages, tribes and remote islands. You could pass by one of us on the street and not even notice. We go undercover. We remain behind the scenes. It is of no concern to us who takes the credit, but simply that the work gets done. Occasionally, we spot each other on the street. We give a quiet nod and continue on our way so no one will notice. During the day, many of us pretend to have normal jobs, but behind the false storefront at night is where the real work takes place. Some call us the conscious army. We are slowly creating a new world with the power of our minds and hearts. We follow with passion and joy. Our orders come from the central command, the spiritual intelligence agency. We are dropping soft, secret love bombs when no one is looking. Poems, hugs, music, photography, movies, kind words, smiles, meditation and prayer, dance, sacred activism, websites, podcasts, random acts of kindness. We each express ourselves in our own unique ways, with our own unique talents and gifts. Be the change you want to see in the world. That is our motto that fills our hearts. We know it's the only way real transformation takes place. We know that quietly and humbly we have the power of all the oceans combined. Our work is slow and meticulous, like the formation of mountains. It is even visible, not even visible at a first glance, and yet with it, entire tectonic plates shall be moved in the centuries to come. You see, love is the new religion of the 21st century. You don't have to be a highly educated person or have an exceptional knowledge to understand it. It comes from the intelligence of the heart. Be the change you want to see in the world. Nobody else can do it for you. We're now recruiting. Perhaps you'll join us. or already have. All are welcome. The door is open. Blessed be.